Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 8 of the Hits Play podcast. I am Isaac Jimenez, joined every time by James Harding. How are you doing today?
I like that you said salutations.
I'm trying to mix it up, man. My greetings. You doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing good, yeah.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, today we are talking about a kind of a genre. We kind of alluded to it last week with our Oscar, talking about how the Oscars always has this genre. War movies. We're talking about war movies.
Yeah.
I appreciate a good war movie. I think you appreciate a good war movie, but sometimes there are issues with war movies.
Sometimes, yeah. Hey, man, every year has its war movie. At least one a year.
Yeah. If it's not a best picture, you can for sure find it in best sound mixing. So,
True.
I guess I'll start. A trope that I kind of enjoy in most war movies, and you see this. I think you're starting to see this more and more. Well, it's kind of been a theme, I guess, present through all the good war movies is the anti-war sentiment. You know, the war is pointless to it almost. You know, like, why are we? It feels like every good war movie is always, why are we here? Why are we doing this? This is senseless killing.
It's actually really funny you opened with that, because if you threw it to me to open, my opening was also going to be anti-war. And I actually have a quote here. A quote from Francois Truffaut, who is a French director. He said, it's hard to make an anti-war film because war is exciting even if you're against it.
Yeah, that's a deep quote.
But do you think it's true? I mean, Truffaut kind of has a leg up on us because he was making movies in post-World War II Europe, where even if your film wasn't directly about soldiers fighting, the effects of the war were still there and present in every story. So they were technically war films, they just didn't have anything to do with combat. But his sentiment of watching things explode and shoot up and die and stuff like that, it's always exhilarating and exciting to watch.
Yeah.
Even if you try to have an anti-war sentiment by the end of your film.
Yeah, and I think it's just because the effects, right? Like seeing things go haywire, and you know, as much as I like a good drama, sometimes dramas can be a little boring. So watching things shoot at each other and being like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" I kind of do agree with that sentiment, especially in that genre of filmmaking. That, you know, it wasn't really like war movies were the movies. I feel like in that. That's what you saw when you wanted to see some crazy shit happen.
What can I ask you then? What's the war film that you think has a good anti-war messaging in it?
Platoon. I think Platoon, and it's helped. Platoon is helped by Oliver Stone writing about his own experiences. But I just feel like, you know, Vietnam War is the war where everybody started turning, where war wasn't really pretty anymore and war was kind of pointless. And so I feel like Platoon, it has that theme in it, and it that is basically what Platoon is this like anti-war message that Oliver Stone created to kind of show that, hey, war is not so cool after all. And I feel like after Platoon, you saw that a lot more in most of the war movies. I mean, you would see it before, but it wasn't, you know, as, I guess, in your face as after Platoon.
And I was thinking about this too, how one of the themes commonly explored in war movies is conflict. And you brought this up too, because every story needs conflict, but war is conflict, just as an action.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how each individual war has its different take on conflict. Like World War II movies. This episode is gonna be terrible from my enunciation. World War II, WW2 movies tend to think that their conflict is justified because, the Nazis and
Yeah,
Japan
that's the
bombing
only
Pearl Harbor.
war that's where it's like it's very clear, black and white, good guy versus bad
Yeah.
guys.
But then you get to like the Vietnam where it's almost completely reversed, where every Vietnam film is like it's not justified at all.
Yeah,
It's almost pointless, and that becomes that the same theme is explored on both sides of the coin, depending on the war, and even to some degree. Like I feel like it kind of flipped with like the Gulf Wars and with Afghanistan, where now it's back to it's justified again.
yeah, because we're coming to save the day from
Yeah.
terrorists. Yeah,
Or where it's retribution for 9/11.
yeah, yeah, that too. An interesting film though that was anti-war, and it was created after, so it's created later. But one that was really interesting, I don't know if you've seen it, was Peter Jackson's "And They Shall Not Grow Old."
Oh, what wasn't that it was documentary footage, but it was recolored.
Yeah, he recolored and narrated it with he hired voice actors.
I never saw that, but how was it?
It
What
was-
about it?
it was good.
Because it was World War One.
Yeah,
right?
it was all firsthand accounts of the war, and it was kind of interesting seeing that that anti-war sentiment was even present back then, but because the public didn't have
Yeah.
like a big it's interesting because before the war all these soldiers were like, yeah, we're gonna go to war, we're gonna fight for our country, we have this pride, and then they're in the war and they're like, why are we here? This is stupid. But because we didn't have access to the battlefield like we did in Vietnam and beyond,
Yeah.
the American people didn't, or not even the American people, just people back home didn't have that same like understanding of how pointless the war was.
True.
And I think, and
Well,
so
just speaking of World War One in general, would you say that this is not entirely meant to shift topics because you can compare these two, but would you say that 1917 approaches World War One in a similar way to the documentary footage?
yeah, I think so. I think just kind of showing how senseless it was, and it really was a tragedy, that war. I mean, all war is tragedy, but that one especially kind of has a deep place in my heart, just because it really was stupid. It really was a stupid war to fight. But yeah, I think they're
Here's a
if
war movie
you
for
watch
you, too.
if you watch them together, they really do captivate the time period and how much different it was for people back home and people in the actual trenches.
Have you ever seen the movie Gallipoli?
I have heard of it. I haven't seen it.
It is a Mel Gibson film when he was still in Australia. It's about the Australian side of World War One, or at least it's the real life story of two people fighting for Australia in World War One. It's kind of similar to 1917 in that it's about two people who are kind of given a doomed mission to begin with. But that was one of those films where, because I think a lot of people don't realize just how involved the entire world was in World War One.
Yeah.
Like, there were Australians fighting in the Middle East in World War One,
was-
and that's still part of the conflict.
Yeah, there was Indians.
It's a different theater than Europe.
Yeah.
And that's a film where, in terms of how that film approaches its anti-war message, because it's about two friends, and because almost as soon as they get it that their mission is doomed, that you can't help but see the entire war and the entire conflict as like it's almost a microcosm for it. It's like you're just sending these people to their death just so that you can get one message across, get one telegram across. And Mel Gibson has his Mel Gibson, his Gil Mibson moments. But for a solid war film that I think does a really good job of bringing character into war. I think Gallipoli is a pretty fantastic. It's an old film, but I think it does it fantastically. Especially because one thing you could criticize war movies for is they don't have much character in them. Even, I don't know if you ever saw Hacksaw Ridge.
Is that the one with Andrew Garfield?
Yeah. That's where he plays. So that's an interesting anti-war / maybe possibly pro-war movie. It's also directed by Mel Gibson, so he's at it again.
He just put his character
Do
from
you know the
Gallipoli.
plot of it?
That's the one with the conscientious objector, right?
Yeah. It's about a guy who, when the 10 Commandments say thou shalt not kill, he's like, thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
I want to fight for my country, but I can't kill anybody because it goes against my religion. But he doesn't want to be a medic. He just wants to be a soldier. He just doesn't want to kill anybody. But it's based on this true story where he basically gets involved in a battle, and he doesn't kill anybody. He barely even holds a gun, but he still manages to help win the war without really... Well, no spoilers for what he does. But unless you don't want to watch a Mel Gibson movie, in which case he saves people's lives by taking them back to Medbay.
Yeah, he won the Medal of Honor, right? The real life person.
Yeah. Also based on a true story.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard the story. I just haven't.
But like that one individual story of the guy who wanted to fight in war, but didn't want to kill anybody, you could turn that into an anti-war movie, but I don't think Hacksaw Ridge does. Hacksaw Ridge definitely ends with a and then we dropped the bomb and America saved the day kind of message.
Does it do more like this is the American spirit kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I could see that, yeah.
Definitely.
Especially because it's a Mel Gibson movie.
Issue. Yeah, definitely. I remember I talked about Lone Survivor. It's not a bad movie, but my biggest issue with it is so much of it was like America, yeah, kind of stuff. Where there's literally a scene where Mark Wahlberg is talking to a kid, and the kid points at this Texas flag on his shirt, and the kid's like, America? And Mark Wahlberg is like, yes, Texas is America.
I mean, Texas is America.
But it's like, that's...
Hey man, you're moving here in a couple weeks. You gotta get in that, or in a couple months, you gotta get in that mindset.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, but I know what you're saying. Funny. I get what you're saying. Because sometimes it can come off cringy, yeah.
Literally a moment. It's so cringy, but there's another super cringy moment in the film. Lone Survivor is based on the true story. And I don't have to spoil anything because the title is a spoiler.
Yeah.
But one of the men in the operation is, as he is dying, the way it is filmed, it's almost like, look at how glorious this is to die in war. And I was like rolling my eyes like, come on, don't do this to him. He's dying alone
by himself
in a foreign country by himself, and you're shooting it like he's standing on top of a mountaintop, like with all the sun coming through the clouds, and I'm like, get out of here.
I mean, it was, if we're talking about the same character, it was a very, to play devil's advocate, that was a very heroic thing for him to do, because he goes out there with the radio, right? Because they can't get the radio when they're in the bottom message. Yeah, I mean, it was all for naught because the spoiler alert, the helicopter gets shot down. But
well,
I don't know. I think
it's a spoiler, so you can assume everyone dies except for one guy.
One guy in all of America survived. It was Mark Wahlberg.
My issue was not the way that they framed what he did, because he did that in real life. The issue was that it was like, this is not Frodo destroying the ring. It was so ridiculously. Yeah. It was one of those moments where I was like, is this movie pro-war?
Yeah, they could have shown like an uglier side of him getting shot down on top of the hill. No, I can see what you're trying to say. Yeah, I don't disagree. I think it would. I think it almost would have been more impactful if they did show him being. I mean, obviously it's a real life person, so you don't want to disrespect them that way.
Disrespect him. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it would have been a little more impactful if it wasn't as kind of dressed up, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like war movies try too hard to be dark and gritty and realistic?
At times, yes. I think that's why Dunkirk was so refreshing as a war movie, because it wasn't super dirty.
Yeah.
If like Dunkirk, in comparison to like Black Hawk Down or even Platoon, it was super clean because we don't see a lot of bodies pile up. We don't see a lot of. We don't see. I don't think we see any blood. Do we see any blood?
Yeah. Barely any. I can't even remember any.
None of the, spoiler alert, none of the characters die that we follow. At least, a lot of the extras die, but not the main crew, I guess. Like a movie like Full Metal Jacket, which kind of shows the toll it takes on the mentality of the soldiers, and seeing that dirtiness.
You know what? I actually thought that Full Metal Jacket was a relatively clean movie. It has its moments. It has its blood and guts. But that's an interesting example where I feel like the cinematography was almost like sanitized.
Yeah, because it's
what
not.
You're seeing is dirty and rough, but the way it's filmed is almost like clinical.
Yeah. And Dunkirk is the same way.
Full Metal Jacket is such a good movie. Yeah. What do you think? Here's something interesting. Here's a trope in a lot of war movies is the boot camp. And this is definitely one of those things that like you can trace the lineage back to Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah. Well, because that whole first half of Full Metal Jacket is so iconic when they're at boot camp. Yeah. Even in what was it, Forrest Gump? Forrest Gump has a boot camp scene, and he's in Vietnam for like 20 minutes.
Forrest Gump does. Jarhead has one.
Yeah.
And it's actually really funny. And I was thinking about this too because I was watching Jarhead, and I was like, this is almost beat for beat the Full Metal Jacket boot camp scene. But
yeah,
Jarhead is based on the true story, and I've even read the book, and he talks about boot camp, and it's almost beat for beat what he says in the book. And I was thinking like, okay, are war movies copying Full Metal Jacket? Or did real life drill instructors model their behavior based off of Full Metal Jacket?
It's probably a little
when it came out.
Both, to be honest.
Yeah. That was
even like Glory. Half of Glory is just them in boot camp.
It's a little overdone. And I'll be honest, as great a film as Full Metal Jacket is, the boot camp stuff just went on for, I felt like, a bit too long.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It might be yeah. Okay, good.
And then there's like there's like the opposite in Fury, where it's literally just, hey, here's a handgun. This is how you work a turret. All right, we're on the road.
Yeah. Quick and dirty. Get out of there.
Speaking of Fury, what were your thoughts on that movie?
I've not seen that movie.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that movie?
So it's not very historically accurate or logistically accurate, or
does that matter? Because I noticed this. A lot of war movies that have been coming out in the last 10 or so years are all based on true stories.
Yeah.
They're almost all adapted from nonfiction books as well, but they're all true stories.
I'm not asking every war movie to be based on a true story, but like when a Tiger tank in hiding comes out and starts engaging with Sherman tanks, that's where I draw the line. That's a little bit of like I know how military tactics work to a degree, so it's just me kind of being a nerd about that.
Dude, all those hours in World of Tanks have really built up.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. On my iPad, it's cool. Yeah, on my phone.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I think just like have a little bit of realism too. I think that's why I enjoy Zero Dark 30 so much, especially that last 30 minutes when they're raiding Bin Laden's house, is because it's like,
yeah,
okay, this is how this should go. Like
Yeah.
I see this, like it is how it went down.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that.
In a weird way, I think it's sometimes I think it's okay for war movies and maybe more so historical war movies to have fictional plots and fictional stories, but there's still the expectation for them to stick to the realism of what the war was like.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the best example of that is Saving Private Ryan.
Yes, 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 yes. That I mean, just
It's
that
a
opening
completely
scene.
fictional. Oh yeah, the Omaha Beach scene
Yeah,
is nasty. Apparently,
It-
it was so accurate. A lot of veterans who they invited some people to the premiere, and a lot of veterans couldn't even make it through that. It
I
was
wouldn't.
just too familiar.
Yeah, if you went through that hell and had to go through it again, I wouldn't do it.
Which is where the discussion of war movies being super realistic and super dark and gritty and almost too accurate. Like I think that goes back to the whole anti-war debate of if you want to be anti-war, why are you taking such precaution to show people how exciting and exhilarating it would be?
Yeah. That's another thing I like about Saving Private Ryan is it's not trying to glorify at all. Like, I think
Yeah.
every character at one point is like, "This is stupid. Like,
Yeah.
why are we doing this?" Especially because their whole mission is to go save one guy, and they're like, "This is like, why can't we
Yeah.
just break orders for once?"
Yeah, seriously.
Because even
It's not
even
exactly
Tom
Band
Hanks,
of Brothers.
even Tom Hanks, who any other, war movie would probably be like, yeah, let's go get him, guys. Let's rally the troops. But even he breaks down a couple times and is like, shit, am I doing
Yeah.
the right thing? Like, I'm leading 7 guys to their death potentially to save 1. Is that the right thing to do? And I think that's why Saving Private Ryan kind of stands out as one of, if not the greatest war movie, whatever that means, because it's all subjective.
And it's also just, I mean, when we talk, it kind of similar to the boot camp stuff, how you can trace all the boot camp scenes back to Full Metal Jacket. Anytime a character gets shell shocked in a war film, or you just see a super chaotic battle scene, it's 100% just recycling Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
the
it's
most
also
part.
one of those things where it's like how a lot of war movies now feel obligated to have a boot camp scene because of Full Metal Jacket. A lot of World War II films are obligated to have a D-Day scene because of Saving Private Ryan.
Even World War II
Like
video
everyone
games.
wants to do their version of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's their version of it.
Are there any other
I-
tropes
here's a
that
question.
you? Oh, go give me a question.
Oh, tropes. I was thinking of, so when we were talking about character, one of my big issues with some war films, like Hacksaw Ridge is probably one of the worst offenders of this, but like, and I'll even say The Pacific, if you remember that miniseries. The Pacific is a pretty big offender of this too. War films are really good if there's like a handful of specific characters or if there's no characters whatsoever. A lot of films, specifically the ones that I mentioned as being offenders of this trope, will just throw in these like stock characters. Like every war movie has the big tough guy,
Yeah.
and then there's like the Italian guy, and there's the black dude and the guy from the South, and they start out hating each other and then they end up friends. And I'm just like, I've never been in the army, so I don't know how accurate that is, but I see it too often to believe it's ever accurate at all.
Well, you know who's the bigger offender of that? One of the biggest offender of that is Fury. Fury has
Oh,
this
really?
such oddball
Well, it's-
group of characters that somehow get along with one another, and it's kind of like I don't know if you guys would get along. I mean, they've been at war for so long, so probably at some point they're like, all right, we'll get along together.
Yeah.
But it's like you have Brad Pitt is a hard ass. You have a devout Christian. You have a Mexican.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have the rookie, and then you have who does John Bernthal? John Bernthal plays like a hard ass like drunk.
Mm.
It's like a weird mismatch of characters that somehow get along.
And by mismatch, we mean literally just stock characters you'll see in every other horror movie
Yeah,
ever.
yeah, exactly.
That's one of those things where maybe I'm been spoiled because like stuff like here's the opposite of it. Full Metal Jacket, you know absolutely nothing about the characters, yet you could easily pinpoint every one of their personalities. In just like some characters who only have one or two lines come across as so personable and well characterized, it is insane. I remember being like, Jesus Christ, this guy has only said like 3 things, and I felt like I've known him the whole film.
So how do you feel about Dunkirk, where you literally know nothing about? You don't even know their names.
I still appreciate that
Yeah.
because, especially when it's something that big, like I think Black Hawk Down has this too. So much of it is just the event itself is interesting to watch. The evacuation or the rescue mission in Black Hawk Down. I'm like, this, just the plot itself is enough to keep me entertained. I have another trope for you too.
Give me another trope.
Here's a trope that I think has done well, but I still roll my eyes every time I see it. And this is one thing that also goes back to Saving Private Ryan. Someone gets shot, they're about to die, everyone tries to save them, and then they die at the last minute. It is
My
so
favorite is when
pervasive.
kind of going off of that real quick, when they get shot and they like have a whole monologue before they die.
Oh, yeah. And I'm like, just die already. You know what? I'll say this too. This is a weird tangent, but one of the things I really liked about Lone Survivor was how it was accurate enough in that characters were getting shot 2-3 times and
Still standing.
they were bleeding, but they were just, yeah. I'm like, that is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
It's not just, you get shot in the stomach and then you're
Out.
dead instantly.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that about Loans. That's one of those things where I'm like, that little bit of realism just comes in handy, Just sneak that in there. I appreciate that. But no, the trying to save a dead guy trope. Dude, the freaking movie Battle Los Angeles is about aliens invading Los Angeles County.
Yeah.
And there is still recycled scenes from Saving Private Ryan. There's still moments of, he's about to die, we have to save him. Oh, we didn't save him. Oh, no. I'm like, why? You have aliens.
There's so many other things we could be worrying about right now. Why are we worrying about
I know.
one of 2,000 people who just died? But I guess when you're that, to play devil's advocate, I guess when you're that close to the guys that you're with, you kind of try and save everybody.
Yeah. That's true. And that reminds me too, because there's always that moment of like, if they'll find like a corpse of the enemy and they'll like they'll mess around with it or they'll play with it, or like, the character who's the most messed up in the head will be like, they'll make a joke about the corpse. And I remember the scene in Jarhead where the guy is like, hanging out with the corpse, and his staff sergeant is like, the army does that, the Marines don't. You're gonna get fired when we go back home. You're suspended. I was like, hey, finally.
Quit being a bitch.
Someone gets, yeah. Dude. Okay. Speaking of Jarhead, and I guess we'll start with Jarhead too. What do you think about war films that kind of don't show a lot of combat or don't show a lot of action? Or, I guess a better way to phrase it, do you know any subversive war movies? Because Jarhead, and the book is like this too, it's really about the build up to combat. There's almost no combat in either the book or the film. And even at the end of the film, he's like, I was in the desert for 160 days and only 4 days were at war.
I kind of like that. It shows a different take on the war, and that the war isn't always just guns blazing. We're shooting
Physical.
everything. Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's a kind of like a mental aspect of warfare that I think a lot of people don't understand, and so I think movies like Jarhead and even Platoon. I don't think Platoon has that. It's been a while since I've seen Platoon, but I don't think Platoon has many crazy
combat
action
scenes.
sequence. They just have that
Yeah.
one big one at night. I remember that, but a lot of it is just how the characters interact and kind of how they deal with what's going on around them.
Yeah, true. I think the most egregious example I can think of, and I know that this is a meme for me to bring up this director every episode, but The Thin Red Line,
I knew
directed by
I
Terrence
knew
Malick.
it was coming. Was waiting for it.
It's exactly what you would expect. If you're like, what would it be like if Terrence Malick directed a war film? It would just be characters sitting around talking about the meaning of life. There's almost no combat whatsoever in the entire film. But as pretentious as it sounds, I think it is probably the better take on how to make a meditative war film. Because a lot of films have these themes of we're anti-war, but they'll still have tons of combat in them. I think Thin Red Line is a good one where it's just the characterization. There's almost no war whatsoever. And if there is, it happens like in the distance. Watch Terrence Malick movies. Okay, now I'm done.
I need to watch Terrence Malick movies so that way you can be pleased.
Watch Thin Red Line. It's good.
That's the one with Adrian
It's long,
Brody,
though.
right?
He's in it for like 5 seconds, but yeah,
Oh,
he's in
okay,
it.
cool. Well, he's on the poster.
Name
so.
an A-list actor from the 90s, they're in it.
Ah, okay. So it's one of those movies for like 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. Yep.
Cool. It's another movie that's kind of similar to that, and also Jarhead that we've talked. All Quiet on the Western Front.
That is a really interesting. That's also a really old film too.
Yeah.
Isn't that in black and white?
1930, black and white.
That's a good example, I think, of a film from the quote unquote enemy perspective.
Yeah, because it shows that the war affected everybody, even the book, especially.
Have you read the book?
Yes, I have read the book. It's one of my favorites.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, it's just
Explain to me why it is one of your favorites.
the book.
Is it anti-war? Both.
The book is yes. Well, both are yes. It's just showing again. I have I don't want to say soft spot to World War One, but it's one of my more interesting.
You're a history buff about it.
Yeah, it's one of the more interesting wars I think we've had in the 20th century. But it just shows the life of a soldier during World War One, and he also goes home, and a lot of people at home don't know the true scope of what's going on. Like they still think it's this, guys lining up, like Napoleonic war kind of warfare, when that's anything but the case. And so I think it's interesting. It's an interesting take on showing that the war isn't really what we think it is. And it's also super depressing read. I was just like, God, like they're shooting rats. They're like taking dumps in front of each other. They're in holes for hours and days on end. They're losing
What
guys
do you
left and
think
right to
is
dysentery.
How would you, without necessarily spoiling, well, you can spoil it because everyone probably knows it. What would you say is the significance of the final shot in the film?
Oh man, it's been so long. What's the final shot again? It's been so long since I've seen this movie.
It's him trying to catch the butterfly.
I want to say it's almost like he's trying to regain his innocence. Regain that
Nice,
freedom
not
that he
bad.
had before the war.
Mm.
Again, I've read the book recently, but it's been so long since I've seen the movie. So I can't.
You know, it's funny. It's interesting how you say that World War II you have the soft spot for, because that's how I felt about the Gulf War and Iraq War, which is why I also own Jarhead and have read it and have seen the film.
Nice.
That's my version of your All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah, All Quiet on the Western Front. Great read. Recommended for everybody to read.
And you know what else is interesting too? The Pacific also has that element of a character going back home to the States, and he's put in charge of raising war bonds for the film or for the war in order to get money to pay for the war. And there's that element where he's treated as like a hero, but he's like, all my friends are still dying in the Pacific. I just want to go back.
Yeah.
Stop acting like we're heroes or something like that. Stop acting like this is a good thing for us.
Yeah.
Not many things I think explore that conflict. And it sucks that it's in the Pacific because the Pacific is inferior to Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
But
Band of Brothers, we need to talk about.
nevertheless.
You want to talk about, you mentioned characters that are, you like a lot of characters. I think that's
Dude,
one of
Band
the
of Brothers
greatest
is like
ensembles of characters in a war, anything. I'm going to count it as a war movie because it's 10 hours, but
a 10-hour long war movie. We're making Showa about Band of Brothers, yeah.
it kind of counts.
But if you watch it all back to back, yeah, probably.
Yeah.
As you are supposed to. I don't know why you would watch it any other way. Coffee.
So people got to
But,
take bathroom breaks, I guess.
Dude,
But that
Band of Brothers-
show also kind of suffers from that America F yeah mentality at points, right?
a little
would
bit,
you-
yeah,
would-
for
would you
sure.
agree?
I definitely think at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
I think Band of Brothers does a good job by the end of the show as the war is winding down. They take a lot of emphasis onto the toll, the physical and mental toll that it's had on these characters.
Yeah. Like one of
Well,
the
it's all real people.
commanders, he gets demoted and then he loses his job when he gets back, right? Something like that. I remember reading
Yeah.
something like just how effed up a lot of these guys were when they got back to the States.
Yeah. It was
Quality show.
by the end of it, they were out of it pretty much. But nonetheless, the stuff that they did and went through, I think Band of Brothers it has its inaccuracies, but you can't fault it for them. I don't think so. I think if for just a story told in war, Band of Brothers is probably one of the best you could even ask for.
So we're talking about some tropes that we liked. What are some tropes that we kind of alluded to them, but what are some tropes that you don't like in war movies? You mentioned characters, how sometimes characters can be kind of like they're boxes, basically.
Yeah.
What would be some other?
Cardboard cutout characters.
Yeah.
Some really bad war tropes. I'll tell you a type of character I want to see more of. And that's medics. Especially World War II for some reason. But medics. I don't know many films that Hacksaw Ridge doesn't count because the guy specifically rejected
Being a medic.
A medic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a trope that I don't like in war films. And this is a hard trope to say that I don't like because people die in war, but there's always this moment or scene of a character who like they'll start out, they have their redemption arc, maybe they're a bad guy and then by the end they're a good guy, but then as soon as they become good, they get shot. Like this person who is always willing, like, oh, I'll do this dangerous suicide mission. And I'm like, nobody would ask you to do that. Nobody would even let you volunteer for that. Suicide missions in war movies are probably some of the least accurate things you would see.
Yeah, I would agree. I will say, what I want to see out of this genre more? Can we start pushing back a little bit, like pre-Civil War?
pre-Civil War. So like,
Yeah,
you want a Revolutionary War movie,
yeah, yeah.
or you
And I'm not
want
talking
a,
like a Revolutionary War
Napoleon?
movie that I watch on History Channel. I want glory, but I want it based on the Battle of Yorktown or something.
Dude, I would love to see
Or like
something
300,
like.
but actually accurate.
Wait, are you telling me that's not historically accurate? What?
No, yeah, dude's in a cut to the cut like marble. Definitely wore nothing but skirts on the
Yeah,
battlefield.
the skirts were accurate. The skirts were the most accurate part of 300. I would love to
But yeah,
see
I think
like
that's what I want to see more of.
I would love to see like 19th century, yeah, like Napoleon kind of war, you know. That would be interesting.
Or even like, even if you went all the way back to like the Vikings, I think, or not even the Vikings, like medieval age. Like I think is why I liked the King, Timothy, the one that Timothy Chalamet is. We kind of mentioned, I mentioned it last week. The reason I like it so much is because we haven't had, what is it, 5th century, 4th century? I think it's 6th century. Oh, 14th. So the 15th century. I'm sorry. So we haven't had a movie set in the 15th century in I don't think, I can't name any off the top of my head right now. But I think that's why I liked it so much is because we're watching like a new era of warfare. And we're also still getting those themes of current warfare, like the why are we doing this kind of thing.
Would you classify those as war films or just historical films? Or historical
no,
drama?
I'm saying, yeah, it's a historical drama, but I'm saying I would like to see war movies in that time period, is what I'm saying. Sorry.
Okay. Because I think the thing is not that people aren't making those types of films. I just think they're not being called war movies. Like the genre people would classify them as.
No.
is
I'm
more
not saying we need
historical
more.
drama.
I'm not saying we need more Timothy Chalamet playing King Henry. I'm saying
I
we
don't
need
think we need
more.
any.
I want to see horses run into each other. Damn it.
Yeah. Dude, shout out to Mulan. Pretty good. The
I want dudes with
Mongolia.
longbows sniping each
Yeah.
other from halfway across like a football field.
Dude, heck yeah. That's like freaking Nausicaa Valley of the Wind type of stuff right there.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
Now,
I feel
here's
like
the-
it's an underrepresented genre, or I guess time period of military history.
I remember reading that before he died, Stanley Kubrick was working on a Napoleon film.
Ooh.
And that probably would have been pretty ambitious, a little crazy maybe, but I definitely would have liked to see that era of combat in film. Stuff like that I love.
Yeah.
Like the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, those kinds of wars, stuff like that. Pre-World War One, like just before World War One, stuff like that. But I think part of the issue is that would be so much work.
Yeah. The budget would be ridiculous
Yeah.
just for the costumes
Yeah.
and the
And
production
also,
design.
stuff like that isn't really in public consciousness enough to justify it, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Everyone learns about World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, and nowadays Iraq and
Romans.
Afghanistan. Anything before that, you would really have to work to get it into like people would need to be justified to see it.
It could be done though.
Well, yeah, it
Potentially.
absolutely could be done. I mean, I can barely even name a Civil War film outside of Lincoln, which has none of the Civil War in it.
Glory
Okay, yeah, you've been talking about that
with
one.
Matthew.
I should have seen that coming.
I mean, it could be done though because we came out with Mel Gibson directed Braveheart.
True. We've been talking about Mel Gibson a bit too much this episode.
Yeah, I don't like it
We
too
should cut
much.
it out.
But I mean, Braveheart's considered one of the greatest movies of all time.
It is a good historical war film. as well.
Even though it's
Absolutely.
not historically accurate
Historically accurate
whatsoever.
at all. Yeah.
Have you seen the
But
sequel
for the
to it?
time-
The
There's a
Robert
sequel?
the Bruce. Yeah,
Why
Robert
is
the
there a
Bruce.
sequel? I'll
I don't know.
pass. I'll pass.
It came out in 2019.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
You want to know
Why
how much you want to know how much it made at the box office?
Well, what was his budget?
Doesn't say.
Okay. Well then.
So that's usually a good sign.
Box office, I would put it at around 2 million.
Not even close. 23,000.
3,000?
Yeah.
Like $3,000?
23,000, sorry. 23,000.
$23,000?
Yep.
That's insane. So, like I was saying, it's not in public consciousness enough for people to really have a need to see
I guess
that
Mel
time
Gibson.
period.
I guess the key to making a good movie set in the early
past
centuries is
is-
have Mel Gibson as your leading man, so you can put his name all over the poster.
So I don't think we'll be getting any of those films anytime soon.
Probably not.
man.
Probably not.
Or Mel Gibson. What's a trope that you like in war films?
I mean, I enjoy characters. We've kind of mentioned that. I enjoy, I think Glory is probably one of my favorite films, just because the characters. There's like 2 battle scenes in it, but all the characters in Glory are so iconic,
Mm.
and it's such a interesting story as well because
Oh, I have an even better question for you. We can get
Give it to me.
specific with this one too. What war films have good cinematography, and what do you think makes good cinematography in a war movie?
well, the one that jumps off to my head is 1917, Dunkirk, Private Ryan.
Private Ryan is a really good example, I think, too, because since that film, so many movies have based their cinematography on Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah,
It's like the codifier for how to film a war movie, pretty much. Because it was like, okay, let's not just be realistic and gritty. Let's actually make it seem like you're standing over their shoulder, on the
let's
beach
rub
with
dirt
them.
all over the camera lens.
Yeah. Throw dirt at the camera lens, spray blood on the camera lens, and it's like,
Yeah,
it's almost overwhelming, but it was so
That's kind of
effective
that's
that
the
everyone
point.
has copied it since.
yeah. I think that's what makes good cinematography in a war movies. First, what kind of war movie do you want to make? Do you want to make a gritty one, or do you want to make kind of like that clean cut? As far as the grittiness, I think Private Ryan's probably at the top. I think Lone Survivor is probably up there as well, as far as the cinematography. Even the clean
I would-
movies like
Like Full Metal
Dunkirk
Jacket.
in 1917 and Full Metal Jacket,
Yeah. And Jarhead.
the
I would say, is there
cinematographers
too.
know how to Jarhead, the cinematographers know how to frame, and so they're cleaner and they're more like,
Yeah.
I don't want to say art housey, but they're more art housey in their
Mm.
execution.
Well,
Dunkirk especially.
what I think is interesting too is that movies like 1917 use the long takes as a good way to show scope, because the characters, it's not like everyone will bring up the film Atonement, how there's this 10-minute long shot at the beach and it's all one take, but they're just at the beach. 1917, they're going like across
Everywhere.
battlefields and through cities and
Yeah.
barns, and they're everywhere. And I think they use that long take. It's more motivated than justified in 1917 because the scope of the war is
You
part
also
of the
kind
story.
of get, when you watch a long take like that, you kind of get exhausted.
Yeah, that's
For
good
me,
point,
watching
too.
1917, I remember when they left the trenches right before they get to the little village. I was like, man, this is really one take. I'm tired. Like, I couldn't even imagine how they feel.
It's you get a little fatigue and a little, at least for me, somewhat anxiety about it. You're like,
Yeah, it's like, when
are
are
they
you gonna
ever
cut?
going?
Can you cut?
Are they ever going to cut again?
Yeah,
And when's
yeah,
it going to
yeah,
be?
yeah.
Like, you're
And that-
anticipating it, but it never comes.
And that subconscious feeling kind of helps elevate the movie.
Yeah, it adds to the emotional storytelling, which is cinematography. Ooh, congratulations.
Yeah. And Dunkirk is the opposite. It's more intimate, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
with 1917, you could see the scope. Dunkirk is a
Yeah.
lot of close shots. It's a lot of, we're in characters' faces. We're in tight spaces.
Yeah.
You really can't see everything that's going on. And I think that helps because the British soldiers didn't know what was going on. They didn't even know if they were going to get off the beach.
That's a good example of
That's
because
another
they're
way of
confined.
anxiety.
Yeah, they're confined to such a small space. They just have the beach, and so
yeah.
they're constantly filmed in these super close angles. And it's on IMAX too. So when you're watching it on IMAX, these super close-ups on this massive screen
Are super close up.
it's emotional storytelling through the cinematography. Oh, look at that.
It's almost like these directors know what they're doing, and they
Oh my
hire
God.
really good cinematographers.
Oh my God. Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be something?
Crazy.
One can dream, Isaac. One can dream. I think the most extreme example, whether or not you would consider this a war movie is debatable, but there's a film called Son of Saul, which is actually about the Holocaust, but it is filmed entirely in close-up. Like the camera does not leave the character's face for the entire film. You don't see anything outside of that. And it uses these extremely long, intricate takes as well. Like it has an average shot length of like 3 minutes or something like that. And it is this like extremely anxiety inducing, like you want to see what's going on, but they never show it to you. And you can only just imagine how horrible it has to be. I think that's whether or not that would count as a war movie is probably debatable, but that is another
That feeling of
example
anxiety.
similar, yeah, to Dunkirk. And this is something we haven't talked about yet at all. The soundtrack to Dunkirk also adds to that anxiousness. The clock ticking, yeah. Or not clock ticking, but it has the illusion where it feels like it's rising, but it never does.
It's the same.
Did you ever see that?
Tempo? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it only stops when they're on the train.
Oh yeah, at the end. It's so good and smart. And that was my critique. One of my big problems with Lone Survivor.
The
I was
soundtrack.
like, so many of these action scenes would be just better without music.
That's a problem I think a lot of action movies feel, is that they need to have sound, like a
That was
soundtrack
even
to it.
something I didn't like that about Full Metal Jacket either. I was like,
Yeah, I think
it's almost
what movie?
music overload.
Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump. That when they're in Vietnam, as soon as the shooting starts, they cut out the music, and it's just nothing but sound effects. And I think that was really
like that.
powerful.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
I like when a
in
movie
one
does
scene.
that, when it lets you get immersed in the moment.
Now, to be fair, Full Metal Jacket thematically is purposely about duality. I think what a character explicitly says that he's exploring the duality of man at one point. So the film is really explicitly about like this contrast between war and the more lighthearted parts of war, or just like finding a human, grounded, not insane part, and the music plays a role in that. Because there are scenes of Full Metal Jacket where it's like, it's not just the calm moments where music plays. It's like combat scenes will start, and then they'll start playing like psychedelic rock over top of it, and I'm just like, there's a bit of mood whiplash, but I get what you're doing, but probably not my cup of tea.
Any other last thoughts?
What's your favorite?
We're gonna do this top five. Top five.
Yeah. I guess do a top five. I just gonna pick a
Cool.
to top one, but try top five.
Top five, no particular order. I'm gonna say Dunkirk. I'm gonna say 1917. I'm gonna say, we just talked about it. Platoon. Sorry, Platoon. I'm gonna say All Quiet on the Western Front. I'm gonna say Glory. I really liked Glory.
You love that movie. I'm gonna go with my top five. The first four are all Apocalypse Now, and then the fifth one is probably Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
Apocalypse Now, just everything that I've talked about that I like in war films, Apocalypse Now just does better.
Yeah, I still need to see that one. I've been meaning to see it,
have
but I
not
just
seen, oh my god,
no, no.
it's one of those films that I don't even want to talk about it with somebody who hasn't seen it because
It's an experience.
everything in that film is part of that movie. It is definitely an experience for sure.
Yeah, that's
Don't
one of
watch the
that's
director's
Coppola,
cut.
right?
That is Coppola, yeah, Francis Ford Coppola. And man,
Yeah.
if you want to see, people say that war is hell, but if you want to see real hell on earth, watch the behind the scenes.
The
and
behind the
making
scenes.
of
Yeah, what
Apocalypse Now.
one of one of our professors showed us the I think it's called what is it? Hearts of Darkness, like the making
Yeah.
of or something like that.
Yeah,
He showed us that movie and I was just like, damn, Coppola really is balls to the walls kind of guy. I respect it.
absolutely insane. That's one of those films where like learning how it was made changed my mind on filmmaking. Where I was like, oh, this is like not easy.
Yeah, especially with what he
Difficult.
wanted to do with the limited money that he had.
Yeah. The limited
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
And there was the limited money, the environment, and the actors were like all up against him when making that film.
Yeah.
And by actors,
Yeah, I remember-
I mean Marlon Brando.
I think I saw a scene. I think I saw a scene where they're talking or whatever, and one of the guys is like, "Hey, we need to cut this out." And Coppola just looks at him and is like, "Why?" It's like, "Because this is gonna cost us $5 million or whatever." He's like, "All right, what's the problem?" And the dude's like, "We don't have $5 million, Francis." He's like, "Well, shit, that's not my job. I direct. You do whatever you got to do to get the $5 million." I was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
It's like
No, that
Coppola,
is-
man. You're not helping
He's not
yourself,
messing
man.
around. Yeah. Oh god.
Yeah, that's a good watch if you just want to watch how filmmaking. I think it's one of the most like it's up there in the far as like the budget, right? As far as
Expense.
like, where they planned the budget to go and it went
Oh,
way
yeah.
over budget.
Yeah.
I think it took
They
them like
were
a year to
over
film,
budget.
right?
Over budget and over schedule for sure on that film.
Yeah. Cuz I remember a quote in that movie too where they shot one day and Francis came back with his producer and he was like, "Fuck, this is already over budget." And I was like, "What? Over one day?" It's like, how can you say that about one day? But I was
That's
like, what
just
it turns
one of
out,
those
yeah,
things.
it's one of the most biggest headaches ever in film production history.
And it also changed the way I watch movies too. Because there was a scene where they have helicopters in the sky. And Francis is like, we have to have those in every single take we do now. And it takes them like 10 minutes to get off the ground. And then every time I see a film and I'm like, there's a plane flying by or a helicopter, I'm like, either that's CGI or they did 20 takes and every take they had to have those same helicopters fly
Yeah, like that
overhead.
level of coordination that they had to have.
Yeah. I'm like,
Yeah,
Jesus. But the movie is incredible. It is such a fantastic film. It's one of those films where it's long, but everything is there for a reason. Don't watch the director's cut because you can't add anything to it. The normal theatrical cut, nothing can get taken out because it's a good story and a good character movie as well. The Martin Sheen character, watching him, this isn't really a spoiler, but one of the things that I appreciated about Full Metal Jacket and similarly with Apocalypse Now, there's this idea that a character arc has to go from good to bad or from bad to good. But in war, it's oftentimes from good to bad. Like we see in Full Metal Jacket, he goes from good to bad.
Yeah.
But what he really does is he goes from bad to worse. And Apocalypse Now is very similar. It's not about somebody going from good to bad. It's about somebody going from bad to worse. I don't think a lot of people see that in Full Metal Jacket, but I do. Because he starts off the film, he's like quoting John Wayne and talking about how he wants to kill people. Even if you think he's doing it ironically, it doesn't matter what you intend, it's about what you do. And he's still saying that. And then by the end of the film, where he ends up killing people, it's like that's his character arc. He's not going from innocent civilian to soldier. He's going from soldier to like whatever is beyond that, an actual killer. Anyway, that's my mini rant for.
Yeah, I gotta check it out. You just convinced me to get it on Amazon.
Definitely Apocalypse Now, and this is such a well-made film. Every frame is a painting in that movie. Let me tell you, just shot for shot.
Did you just name drop another YouTube channel on this?
Another YouTube
podcast?
channel? Shut up. Maybe I did. They haven't made a video in over 2 years. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's fair.
But seriously, it's one of those films where I could just watch it endlessly because there's so much in it. There's so much to it. There's so much depth to it because it does a really good job of sucking so much of the life out of combat that by the time you get to combat scenes, you are almost like you're really in the position that Martin Sheen's character is, where you feel like you've lost your mind and you don't really know, you can't tell up from down, and it's disorienting in that way. But I don't know any film that really takes that theme of is war justified or unjustified and shows every side of it and plays both sides out. Where you have the first part with the super war is justified and we have to do everything we can with the whole, I love the smell of napalm in the morning with all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then by the time you see Marlon Brando, you're like, what the hell are we even doing? It's like in Full Metal Jacket where it's not war as hell, it's the world is shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just love Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
Easily one of my favorite films of all time. Top 3, I would say. But yeah.
Damn,
I love that movie. Also watch Thin Red Line by Terrence Malick.
I was wondering when you were going to shout it out. I'm surprised it didn't make your top 5.
It's not even the best Terrence Malick film, dude. I mean, it's good, but
top 5 war movies.
Oh, top 5 war movies. Yeah. I like Jarhead a little bit more. Wait, no, I said
Fair
Full Metal Jacket. Full Metal Jacket is pretty dang good. Full Metal Jacket is also...
Kubrick's one of the best.
For anyone listening, at least this far in, if you haven't seen Full Metal Jacket or Saving Private Ryan, watch them, but you should go in knowing that so much of what you have seen in war films comes from those 2 films. There's a lot of the tropes and cliches that we've talked about are in those films, but that's where they originated from. So they seem kind of old and off and dated, but that's just because it was the first version of those.
So that's our discussion on war movies. You see we're getting some trailers now?
Are we getting trailers?
Kind of go. Yeah, we got they're not great movies, but we
had The Green Knight.
The Green Knight trailer came out? I didn't even see that. Oh my god. That's the A24 movie, right?
Yeah.
Nice. I gotta check it out. I was specifically talking about A Quiet Place Part 2 that we got last week. And then Venom, the Carnage sequel.
When it comes to Venom,
I know you're a big comic book guy.
that post. I know I like comic books, but when it comes to the Venom movies, I just think of that post from where it's Venom, but it's flipped upside down and it spells money.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I hate Spider-Man. I don't know if I've made this clear enough on this podcast, but I don't
think you've mentioned it whatsoever. This is a new take that you guys are getting live.
Anything that has to do with Spider-Man.
Yeah, I
Just
thought it looked bad. Quiet Place Part 2 looks kind of interesting though, because they're turning it from an action movie, from like a suspenseful thriller to an action movie,
Well,
which kind of sucks because the first
Yeah.
one was so original.
yeah.
Speaking of originality that's dying, Purge, the fourth Purge movie's coming out.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Donald Glover in his tweets.
I didn't even see that. I'm not on Twitter.
He was talking about how a lot of films and TV shows are boring because TV shows are afraid of getting canceled, or movies are afraid of not even getting off the ground or greenlit. So they tend to go with safe and boring material.
I mean, he's not wrong to a degree.
No. Yeah. I would agree.
The Purge. Another trailer for The Purge came out. Looks bad. Looks like a fan-made short film.
So you mean every Purge movie?
Hey man, number 2 was good. Number 2 was good.
Number 2 is actually pretty
the
good.
rest
actually.
the rest of them were bad.
Trash. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like the Paranormal Activity films. The second one is the best, and everything else is bad.
It's like Spy Kids. Spy Kids 2 is the best.
All right. I'll allow it. I know we were talking about Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Did you see they're going to make that a movie?
No, are they?
Yeah.
That's weird.
At least it's in the works. So they're bringing it back.
Interesting.
The bomb threat was not enough to keep him away. They're bringing it back.
Oh man, interesting. Cool. Well,
Yeah,
this was
not bad.
This was a good productive talk. We talked about
Yeah.
war movies.
War is bad. Make love, not war.
Make love, not war, folks. Thank you so much for listening in. I am Isaac Jimenez. That's James Harding. Appreciate you listening. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram for any updates on the show. Until then, we'll see you guys next week.